Why God wants you to shut your mouth and let His blessings do the talking. There are moments in life when we stand at the crossroads of joy and struggle, moments when blessings flow like rivers, and we cannot help but marvel at God's generosity. Yet within those moments, there's a strange invitation, not to speak, not to share, but to be silent. Why, we might wonder, would God want us to keep our mouths closed when His blessings have so clearly been poured out? It seems unnatural, doesn't it? In a world that praises open expressions of happiness, why would silence be His will for us? As C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes? But when you look back, everything is different." Perhaps this reflection could not be more fitting for our discussion today. We are called to examine not only our outward expressions, but the posture of our hearts. Is it possible that silence, even in the face of blessing, can speak louder than our words ever could? Welcome to C.S. Lewis 1950. Here, you will discover the path to a deeper and more meaningful relationship with God. In the quiet, we uncover a truth about humility that we might otherwise miss. Humility is not about diminishing ourselves. Rather, it is about turning the focus away from our own desires and placing it on the one who gave us every good gift. When we are blessed, it is natural to want to share our joy, to express our gratitude. Yet, in the midst of our expressions, how often do we find ourselves seeking admiration or recognition from others? This subtle temptation may go unnoticed, but it lurks in the shadows of our desires. Remember, pride can enter through the back door, disguised as the innocent sharing of good news. We feel the need to tell others what God has done, not merely for their benefit, but to remind them of our favor. In that moment, it is not God's glory we seek, but our own. C.S. Lewis understood this danger well. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. This is why silence is so powerful. It keeps us humble, ensuring that our blessings remain a testament to God's grace rather than our own merit. There is a sacredness in remaining quiet before the Lord, especially when blessings overflow. It is a reflection of the truth that everything we have is a gift, undeserved, and yet freely given. Humility allows us to look beyond our own desires and recognize that our blessings are not meant to elevate us, but to magnify God's goodness. To hold our tongues in moments of joy is to acknowledge that God is the source, and that the blessings we receive are not ours to boast about, but to steward with care. But silence is not merely a practice of humility, it also protects us from another subtle enemy: envy. In a world that thrives on comparison, it is easy to fall into the trap of measuring ourselves against others. When we boast about our blessings, we may unintentionally stir up feelings of inadequacy in others, leading them to question God's goodness in their own lives. Even in our rejoicing, we must remember to love our neighbors, to protect their hearts from the sting of envy. As the Apostle Paul reminds us, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility value others above yourselves. By keeping our blessings quiet, we preserve the hearts of those who may be struggling in a season of want. To remain silent in these moments is to recognize that everyone's journey with God is unique. It's a way of saying, I see you, and I honor where you are in your walk. And when the time comes for them to experience God's blessings, we will rejoice alongside them with the same quiet gratitude. In silence, we enter into a deeper intimacy with God. As Jesus taught, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Silence creates a space where our relationship with God can grow without the distractions of the world. It is in the secret place where God's love for us becomes most real, most personal. We don't need to seek the approval of others. We are content in His presence. And in that contentment, we find peace, peace that the world cannot offer. This intimacy is the gift that silence brings. It is an invitation to come closer to God, to trust Him more deeply, and to rest in the assurance that His love for us is not based on our performance or our ability to impress others. It is enough that He knows us, loves us, and delights in us. This is the kind of intimacy that transforms us. The more we experience it, the less we are concerned with the opinions of others, and the more we focus on what truly matters, loving God and loving our neighbors. As we walk through this journey together, let us remember that silence is not an absence but a presence. It is the presence of humility, of love, of trust, and of intimacy. God calls us to be silent not out of shame, but to draw closer to Him, to protect our hearts, and to honor His work in the lives of those around us. May we embrace this call and allow the silence to shape us into the people He has destined us to be. There is a quiet wisdom that comes from holding our blessings in silence, a wisdom that not only protects us, but also shields the hearts of those around us. How often do we find ourselves caught in the delicate balance between celebrating what God has done for us and guarding the hearts of those who may be struggling? It is in this tension, this moment of reckoning, that the practice of silence becomes a profound act of love. When God blesses us, it's easy to feel the urge to share, to tell everyone around us about the goodness we have experienced. But as C.S. Lewis wisely put it, to love at all is to be vulnerable. And vulnerability, particularly when blessings abound, can sometimes become a source of pain for others. It's not that we intend to hurt or provoke envy in those around us. It's simply a matter of recognizing the deep fragility of the human heart. When we boast of our blessings too freely, we may unintentionally make others feel overlooked or less than. We are all aware of the seasons in life. Some are filled with joy, while others are marked by sorrow. But what happens when our season of abundance collides with another's season of suffering? How do we navigate this delicate space? There is no easy answer, but there is wisdom in choosing when and how to share our joys. In doing so, we protect the hearts of those around us from the poison of comparison, the subtle pull of envy that can arise when someone feels they are not measuring up to the blessings of others. The Apostle Paul offers a timeless piece of advice: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. This doesn't mean that we must hide our joy or suppress our gratitude for God's blessings. It means, rather, that we must be mindful of the impact our words have on others. We need to pause before speaking, to consider the timing of our revelations, and to ensure that our sharing does not inadvertently cause someone else to stumble. When we withhold our blessings in silence, we make room for others to shine. We create space for those around us to experience their own unique journey with God without the burden of comparison. It's not about keeping secrets or pretending that everything in our lives is always easy. It's about choosing the right moment to share. The moment when our words can build up rather than tear down. This kind of silence is not an act of selfishness, but of love. We protect others from feelings of inadequacy, from the temptation to envy, and from the pressure to measure up. Silence in this sense becomes an act of service. We are not concerned with our own recognition, but with fostering an environment of grace and humility where everyone can flourish. Consider the words of C.S. Lewis in The Four Loves. What we are to love is the secret of the soul, not the external things. In moments of blessing, it is tempting to focus on the external, on the gifts we have received and the praise that may follow. But true love, the kind of love that Christ calls us to, is focused on the soul. It is focused on the hearts of those around us, the quiet spaces where God is working in ways we cannot always see. To protect that space in others is to love them as Christ loved us, not seeking recognition or praise, but laying down our lives for the sake of another. We must also remember that silence can serve as a gentle reminder that we are all in different seasons of life. There will be times when we are on the mountaintop, basking in the glow of God's blessings, and other times when we are in the valley, waiting for the light to break through. Our role as members of the body of Christ is to honor both seasons, to rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. This means recognizing that there is a time to celebrate and a time to pause, a time to speak and a time to remain silent. When we share our blessings too freely, we risk robbing others of the opportunity to experience the fullness of God's timing. In God's perfect plan, every heart will be lifted in its own season. Just as we rejoice with those who are blessed in the present, we must trust that others will experience their own moments of triumph in God's time. And when that moment comes, we will celebrate with them, just as they have celebrated with us. In this way, silence becomes a powerful act of trust. We trust that God is working in the lives of others, even when we do not see the fruits of that work. We trust that His timing is perfect, that He will bring about the blessings that each person needs when they need them. Our role is not to rush or to compete, but to wait, to trust, and to love. This is the beauty of Christian community. It is not about comparing ourselves to one another, but about lifting each other up in love, regardless of where we are on the journey. Silence allows us to step out of the spotlight and give space for others to grow, for others to experience God's grace in their own time. In doing so, we honor God's work in them, just as we honor His work in our own lives. And so, we must ask ourselves, when God blesses us, is it our first instinct to share or to guard our hearts in silence? Are we ready to protect the hearts of those around us, to love them with the same tenderness that God has shown us? Silence in this sense is not just an act of personal humility. It is a gift to others. It is a choice to place the needs of others before our own desires for recognition, to honor God's work in their lives as much as we do in our own. There is a sacred and quiet place that God invites us to, a place where the noise of the world falls away, where the bustle of life ceases to distract us, and where we can commune with Him in a deeper, more intimate way. It is in the silence that we discover the richness of our relationship with God, not in our outward actions, but in the quiet of our hearts. In those moments, we find that we do not need the approval of others to feel loved. It is enough that we are seen and known by God. C.S. Lewis wrote, "We meet no ordinary people in our lives." These words resonate deeply in the context of silence, because when we keep our blessings to ourselves, when we choose to sit in quiet gratitude before the Lord, we enter into a space of profound intimacy with Him. With Him, it is in that place of stillness that we find our hearts aligned with His, free from the distractions that the world so often throws our way. Consider how often we seek external validation. We want others to see us, to acknowledge our efforts, our successes, and the blessings God has given us. It is a natural desire, born from the need for connection and approval. Yet, when we withhold our praises from others, when we choose to keep God's work in our lives a secret between us and Him, something extraordinary happens. We are no longer seeking affirmation from people. Instead, we are content to rest in the knowledge that God sees us. In that quiet space, we discover that His love for us is sufficient. It is enough. Jesus Himself modeled this form of intimacy with the Father. In the Gospel of Matthew, He speaks of the importance of private communion with God. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. This passage captures the essence of what it means to have an intimate relationship with God. While it's not about public displays of devotion or seeking praise from others, it's about coming into the presence of the Father, where no one else can see, and simply being with Him. When we hold our blessings quietly, we are doing the same thing. We are not hiding them. Rather, we are creating space for God's love to fill our hearts, without the interference of human praise or admiration. It is in these sacred moments that we experience a deeper relationship with our Creator. Our hearts become still, our minds quiet, and we can rest in the peace that comes from knowing we are loved not because of what we've done, but because of who we are in His eyes. This intimacy is not something we can manufacture or earn. It is a gift. It is the quiet whisper of God calling us deeper into His presence. As C.S. Lewis once said, God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from Himself, because it is not there. The peace we long for, the contentment we crave, can only be found in Him. When we allow our blessings to remain between ourselves and God, we open the door to a deeper connection with Him. We discover that His love for us is more than enough. It is everything. In a world that constantly demands more success, more attention, more recognition, the practice of silence allows us to rest in the knowledge that we do not need to prove ourselves. We do not need to impress others or gain their approval. In silence, we are reminded that God's approval is more than sufficient. His love for us is not conditional. It is unwavering, constant, and eternal. This is the kind of intimacy that transforms us. It frees us from the need to perform, to achieve, or to be seen. All that matters is that we are loved by Him. The silence that we practice in moments of blessing is not a denial of God's goodness. Rather, it is a celebration of His sufficiency. When we choose to hold our blessings in secret, we are saying, Lord, I do not need anyone else to recognize what you have done for me. It is enough that you know. It is enough that you see. This is the kind of relationship that God desires with us, one that is not based on outward appearances, but on a deep personal connection that only He can provide. There is freedom in this kind of intimacy. It frees us from the pressure to conform, to seek approval, or to gain recognition from others. It allows us to rest in the love of God, knowing that we are cherished just as we are. When we stop seeking the praise of others, we open ourselves up to a deeper experience of God's love and grace. We find that His love fills the spaces where the world's approval once resided. In this quiet place, we find peace. C.S. Lewis captured this idea beautifully when he wrote, "He who has God and everything else has no more than he who has God only." This truth is profound because it reminds us that God alone is enough. Our blessings, while wonderful, are not the source of our joy. They are merely a reflection of God's love and grace. When we find our joy in God alone, we experience a contentment that the world cannot provide. The pursuit of external validation fades away, and we are left with a heart fully satisfied, the presence of the one who loves us without condition. This intimacy is the most precious gift we can receive. It is a gift that deepens with time as we learn to rest in God's presence, to trust in His goodness, and to delight in His love. As we cultivate this private relationship with Him, we find that our hearts are transformed. We become less concerned with the opinions of others and more focused on the things that truly matter, loving God and loving our neighbors. In the silence, we are drawn closer to Him, and in that closeness we discover the fullness of joy that only He can give. There's a profound depth to the silence that God sometimes calls us into, a silence that not only shapes our hearts, but also teaches us to trust in His perfect timing. In a world that is constantly rushing, always pushing for the next achievement, the next recognition, it can be difficult to pause, to wait, to trust. Yet, God in His wisdom often asks us to be still, to hold our blessings quietly, and to wait for His perfect timing to reveal what He has planned for us. It is in this waiting that we learn to trust, not just in God's gifts, but in His character. C.S. Lewis once noted, "I'm sure that God keeps no one waiting unless He sees that it is good for him to wait." This statement rings true when we reflect on the times in our lives when we feel the desire to rush, to tell others of our blessings, to share our victories, to seek recognition. But silence calls us to something deeper. It asks us to trust that God's timing is always perfect, and that there is wisdom in waiting. The story of Joseph in the Bible provides a powerful illustration of the importance of timing in God's plan. Joseph received dreams from God when he was young, dreams that foretold his future greatness. Yet, instead of being celebrated and uplifted for his visions, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and thrown into a pit of despair. One could easily imagine that Joseph, in the midst of his trials, would have wanted to share his dreams with anyone who would listen, to proclaim the promise of his future greatness. But God had other plans. If Joseph had shared his dreams prematurely, before God's timing had come, his brothers would have likely dismissed him as arrogant or mocked him for his naivety. In God's perfect wisdom, Joseph was kept in silence, in the waiting, where his heart and character could be refined. He was not yet ready for the blessing God had in store for him. And when the time came for Joseph's dreams to be realized, it was not for his glory but for God's. Joseph's rise to power in Egypt was a testimony to God's faithfulness, not to Joseph's own abilities or ambition. This story teaches us a vital lesson about silence. Sometimes, the blessings we receive are not meant to be shared immediately. Just as Joseph had to wait for God's timing, so too must we. We must trust that God knows when we are ready, and that His timing will always be perfect. Silence, in this context, becomes an act of faith. It is a declaration that we trust God to reveal His plans when the time is right, and that we will not rush ahead of Him. God's timing is not always our timing. We live in a world that prizes immediacy, the instant gratification of our desires, the desire to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized. But God does not work according to the world's clock. His timing is perfect because He sees the whole picture. He knows what we need, when we need it, and how it will be most beneficial for His purposes. When we remain silent about our blessings, we are practicing the art of waiting, of trusting that God will reveal His plan in His own time. The Apostle Peter offers this wisdom in 1 Peter 5:6. "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He may lift you up in due time." This passage encapsulates the essence of waiting in silence. We humble ourselves before God, acknowledging that He is the one in control of our lives and our blessings. We trust that He will lift us up at the right time, in the right way, and for the right reasons. Our role is not to rush or force things, but to trust in His sovereignty. There is great peace in this kind of waiting. It frees us from the pressure to perform, to achieve, or to prove ourselves. It allows us to rest in the assurance that God is working on our behalf, even when we cannot see the full picture. When we choose silence, we choose to surrender our desires to God's will. We acknowledge that He knows what is best for us, and that His timing will always be better than our own. In the silence, we also learn to wait, not just for our own benefit, but for God's perfect plan to unfold in the lives of others. Just as we trust that God will bless us in His time, we must trust that He is working in the lives of those around us as well. Silence teaches us patience and compassion. It reminds us that everyone's journey with God is unique, and that God's timing is perfect for each individual. Our role is to wait, to pray, and to trust that He is at work. When we speak too soon, when we share our blessings prematurely, we risk disrupting the timing that God has ordained. Just as Joseph had to wait for the appointed time to fulfill his dreams, so too must we wait for the appointed time for our blessings to be revealed. And when that time comes, we will see that it was worth the wait. God's plan, when it is unveiled, will always be greater and more beautiful than anything we could have imagined on our own. In the end, silence becomes not just a practice of humility, but a discipline of trust. It is a way of saying, "I trust you, Lord, to reveal your goodness at the right time. I trust that your plan is better than mine." And in this trust we find peace, we find contentment, and we find that God's timing is, indeed, perfect. Contentment, in many ways, is one of the most elusive treasures we seek in this world. We are surrounded by messages urging us to chase after more wealth, more success, more recognition, more joy. Yet, as we strive to accumulate these things, we often find ourselves emptier than before, as though we are constantly reaching for something just out of our grasp. In this pursuit, silence calls us to pause, to reflect, and to find peace not in the accumulation of things, but in the quiet assurance that God alone is enough. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, shares a profound secret. "I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." Contentment, as Paul discovered, is not rooted in external circumstances. It is rooted in knowing that Christ is enough. When we learn to find our satisfaction in Him, we no longer need the praise or recognition of others to feel valued. It is enough to be loved by God, to know that He sees us, and that His provision is always sufficient. In a world that is constantly pushing us to attain more, silence becomes a powerful discipline of contentment. When we remain quiet about our blessings, we are practicing the art of holding them lightly. We acknowledge that the gifts we receive from God are not meant to be the source of our joy or our identity. Rather, they are reminders of His goodness and grace. We do not need to seek the applause of others or parade our blessings before the world. In silence, we learn to be content with what we have, knowing that God's provision is always sufficient. C.S. Lewis captured this beautifully when he wrote, "He who has God and everything else has no more than he who has God only." This profound truth teaches us that all the wealth, recognition, or success we might attain in this life pales in comparison to the joy of knowing God. When we allow ourselves to be content in Him, we find that everything else fades into the background. Our blessings no longer define us. God's love and His presence are enough. This kind of contentment is not about suppressing our joy or denying the goodness of God in our lives. It is about recognizing that our joy is not dependent on external circumstances, but on our relationship with the One who created us. When we practice silence, we are also practicing the discipline of being satisfied with less. We are not driven by the constant need for more attention, more validation, more recognition. Instead, we learn to rest in the simple knowledge that we are loved by God, and that His provision is more than enough. This contentment is a spiritual gift that frees us from the pressures of the world, from the need to keep up with the latest trends or to measure our worth against others. It allows us to live in a state of peace, content with what we have, and trusting that God will provide for our needs in His time and in His way. But how does silence fit into this discipline of contentment? It is in silence that we learn to hold our blessings with open hands, ready to give thanks for what we have without clinging to it. Silence frees us from the need to boast, to prove, or to compare. It teaches us to rest in the knowledge that we are loved by God, whether we have much or little. As C.S. Lewis wisely said, God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from Himself, because it is not there. Contentment, then, is not found in our blessings themselves, but in our relationship with the One who gives them. In moments of silence, we find that our hearts are filled with a peace that surpasses all understanding. We are no longer seeking happiness in the things of this world, but in the quiet assurance that God is with us, that He will never leave us or forsake us. This peace is not dependent on the changing circumstances of life. It is rooted in the unchanging love of God. And as we learn to find contentment in Him, we discover that His provision is always enough. Contentment is not a passive state of mind. It is an active discipline. It requires us to choose to rest in God's sufficiency, to choose to be content with what we have, and to trust that He will provide for our needs. Silence plays a crucial role in this process, for it is in the quiet moments that we come to realize that we do not need to constantly strive for more. We do not need to prove ourselves to others. We do not need to seek validation or recognition. In silence, we learn to be content with what we have, knowing that God's love is the most precious gift of all. As we practice silence, we become more attuned to the deeper realities of God's provision. We see that He has already given us everything we need, and that His blessings are a reflection of His love, not of our Venus. In silence, we are reminded that we are not defined by what we have or what we do. We are defined by our relationship with Him, and in that relationship, we find the true peace and contentment that the world cannot offer. This discipline of contentment is not something we achieve overnight. It is a lifelong journey of learning to trust in God's provision and to rest in His love. But as we walk this path, we find that silence becomes a precious companion, a tool that helps us center our hearts on what truly matters: God's love, His grace, and His sufficiency. And in that silence, we find a peace that the world cannot give, a contentment that comes from knowing that we are loved by the One who created us, and that His provision is always more than enough. As we walk through life, we often find ourselves vulnerable to pride when things are going well, vulnerable to envy when others experience blessings we desire, and vulnerable to the pressures of the world around us. In these moments, silence can become a powerful protection for our hearts, a safeguard against the temptations that can so easily derail us. By learning to keep our blessings quiet, we shield ourselves from the subtle snares that threaten to steal our peace and our joy. C.S. Lewis, in his inimitable way, understood the danger that comes with prosperity. "Pride is the complete anti-God state of mind," he wrote. How true this is, particularly in moments when we are experiencing success or blessing. When things are going well, when we are lifted up by God, there is a temptation to believe that we are somehow special, that our blessings are the results of our own merit. In these moments, we must be vigilant, for pride is a slippery foe. It creeps in quietly, often unnoticed, and before we know it, our hearts are turned away from God and focused on ourselves. This is where silence becomes our guard. By holding our blessings quietly, we resist the temptation to boast, to draw attention to ourselves, or to think more highly of ourselves than we ought. When we remain silent, we are reminded that all good things come from God, and that we are merely stewards of His gifts. As James 1:17 reminds us, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights. In silence, we acknowledge that our blessings are not the result of our own doing, but of God's gracious hand upon our lives. But silence does not only protect us from the danger of pride, it also protects us from the envy of others. We live in a world that is often defined by comparison, where we measure our worth by how we stack up against those around us. When we share our blessings too freely, we risk stirring up feelings of inadequacy or resentment in others. This is not intentional, of course. We do not wish to harm those around us, but we must be mindful of the impact our words and actions can have on the hearts of others. In a world that often fosters competition and comparison, silence becomes an act of kindness, a way of protecting others from the temptations of envy and jealousy. As C.S. Lewis once said, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." In other words, God knows exactly what we need, and He will provide for us in His perfect way and in His perfect time. We do not need to rush ahead to share our blessings prematurely, or to seek the approval of others. In silence, we trust that God is working in the lives of those around us as well. We trust that He is shaping their hearts in His time, just as He is shaping ours. And in that trust, we find peace. When we choose to remain silent, we are not denying the goodness of God in our lives. We are simply choosing to guard our hearts against the dangers of pride, envy, and comparison. Silence allows us to reflect on our blessings in a way that keeps our focus on God, rather than on ourselves or on the opinions of others. In this space, we are reminded that our worth is not found in what we have or what we do, but in the love of God. And it is this love that protects our hearts from the subtle dangers that threaten to rob us of our peace and joy. But silence does not only protect our own hearts, it also protects the hearts of others. When we keep our blessings quiet, we create a space where others can experience the fullness of God's timing in their own lives. Just as we have experienced moments of abundance, others will experience moments of abundance in their own time. By choosing silence, we protect them from the dangers of comparison and envy. We honor their unique journey with God, trusting that He will provide for them in His time, just as He has provided for us. This is the beauty of Christian community. We are called to live in love with one another, to rejoice with those who rejoice, and to weep with those who weep. But of this love is recognizing that each person's journey with God is unique. Just as God works in our lives in His time, so too is He working in the lives of others. Silence allows us to honor that process, to protect the hearts of our brothers and sisters from the pressures of comparison, and to create a space for them to experience God's blessings in their own time. In this way, silence becomes a powerful form of love. It is not about hiding our blessings or pretending that everything is perfect. It is about recognizing that there are times when our blessings are meant to be shared with God alone, and that in doing so, we protect both our hearts and the hearts of others. Silence becomes a gift, a way of keeping the focus on God and His work in our lives, rather than on our own desires for recognition or approval. As we practice silence, we become more attuned to the subtle ways in which our hearts can be led astray. We become more aware of the dangers of pride, envy, and comparison, and in this awareness we learn to guard our hearts, to protect them from the distractions and temptations of the world. Silence, in this sense, becomes a spiritual discipline, a way of staying focused on God and His work in our lives. It is a reminder that we are not the center of the story. God is. And when we keep the focus on Him, we find peace and joy that the world cannot offer. In a world where noise, self-promotion, and constant validation seem to be the currency of our existence, there's a quiet power in silence, a power that bears witness to a deep and abiding faith in God. We are often told that we must speak out, proclaim our blessings, and share our victories with the world. But sometimes, God calls us to let our silence speak for itself. It is in these moments that our faith becomes a living testimony, not through words, but through the quiet confidence that we trust in God's perfect plan, even when others cannot see it. C.S. Lewis, ever the profound thinker, reflected on the nature of faith when he said, "What you see and hear depends a good deal on where you are standing. From where we stand, in the presence of God, our silence is not a denial of His goodness, but a declaration of our trust in Him. When we choose to remain silent about the blessings we receive, we are making a statement of faith. We are saying, Lord, I trust that you see me. I trust that you are working in my life, even when no one else knows or understands. Our silence in these moments becomes a profound witness to the sufficiency of God's love. The world may look at us and wonder why we do not shout our blessings from the rooftops, why we do not seek the recognition and admiration of others. But in our silence, we bear witness to a faith that is not dependent on external validation. We are not concerned with what others think or say about us. We are concerned only with pleasing God and living according to His will. This is the essence of quiet faith, a faith that is content in God's approval alone, not in the accolades or praise of the world. Consider the example of Mary, the mother of Jesus. When the angel Gabriel appeared to her and announced that she would bear the Son of God, Mary's response was one of quiet humility. She did not seek to make her news known to the world. Instead, she treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. Luke 2:19. Her silence was not a sign of fear or doubt. It was a reflection of her deep faith and trust in God's plan. Mary knew that the work God was doing in her life was too sacred, too profound, to be shared lightly. And so, she kept it in her heart, trusting that God would reveal His work at the right time. In the same way, when we choose silence in the face of our blessings, we are following Mary's example. We are holding our blessings close, allowing them to grow and unfold in God's perfect timing. We are not concerned with the world's praise or recognition. Praise or recognition. We are simply content to live before an audience of one, our Heavenly Father, who sees all things, knows all things, and loves us unconditionally. This kind of silent faith is a powerful witness to the world. It is a declaration that our joy is not dependent on external circumstances, on the approval of others, or on our ability to showcase our blessings. Our joy is rooted in God alone, and in Him we find peace. We are not seeking to make our blessings known to the world, but we trust that God is using them for His purposes, whether or not others ever see or understand. In the quiet moments, we also bear witness to God's perfect timing. Just as Mary waited in silence for the fulfillment of God's promises, so too do we wait in silence for God to reveal His plans in His time. Our faith is strengthened in the waiting, for we learn to trust that God's timing is always perfect. We learn that He is working in our lives, even when we cannot see the full picture. And when His plans unfold, we will know that they were worth the wait. In silence, we also learn that God's work in our lives does not need to be validated by others. We do not need the praise or admiration of the world to know that we are loved by God. His love for us is more than enough. It is in this silence that our hearts are transformed, for we come to realize that our worth is not measured by what we do or say, but by the fact that we are His beloved children. This knowledge gives us peace. It frees us from the need for external validation and allows us to rest in the assurance that God's love is sufficient. In the quiet of our hearts, we also bear witness to the faithfulness of God. When we choose silence, we are saying that we trust God's work in our lives, even when it is not immediately visible to others. We are not seeking to impress or to make a name for ourselves. We are content to let God's work speak for itself. And in doing so, we become a living testimony to His grace, His timing, and His love. There is a profound beauty in this kind of silent witness. It is the kind of faith that does not seek attention or recognition. It is the kind of faith that trusts that God sees us, that He knows our hearts, and that He is at work in our lives, even when no one else can see it. This is the kind of faith that pleases God, a faith that rests in His sufficiency, a faith that trusts in His timing, and a faith that quietly bears witness to His goodness. As we reflect on the power of silence, we realize that it is not a passive act, but a profound spiritual discipline. In our silence, we protect our hearts from pride and envy. We deepen our intimacy with God, and we trust in His perfect timing. Silence teaches us to find contentment in God alone, to rest in His love, and to bear witness to our faith without the need for recognition. Let us apply these lessons to our lives by choosing silence in moments of blessing, trusting that God is working in ways we cannot see, and allowing our hearts to be transformed by His grace. May we be content with the gifts He has given us, knowing that His love is enough, and may we wait in silence for His perfect timing to unfold in our lives. We would love to hear your thoughts on this reflection. How has silence shaped your faith journey? Share your reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the C.S. Lewis 1950 for more inspiration and wisdom on living a deeper, more meaningful relationship with God.
Please avoid those who mock you, who utter words that steal your joy.